8:07, so we're going to get started. Very, very, very excited to have my friend, my colleague, my mission buddy, Dr. Nii-Daako speak to us today. Like I said, as we get started, we're going to have the participants introduce themselves, then I'll introduce you and let you share your story. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, let's jump into it.
So, Carissa, introduce yourself. Just let us know your name, what state you're in, where you are in your training. You're muted.
Hello.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry. I'm Carissa Nii-Daako. I'm a third year medical student at Florida State University, College of Medicine. And yeah.
What's your area of interest?
I'm keeping my options open right now. So I'm kind of all over the place, but we'll see.
Good
answer. Open mind.
He doesn't want to say nothing.
Exactly. Thank you for being here. Max, go ahead and introduce yourself. You are currently muted. Max, are you there? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we'll come back to you, Max. And then I guess, Paul, let's have you introduce yourself. Okay, give me 1 second, I'll unmute you. All right, go for it, Paul. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, Paul.
Can you hear me? Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Paul Opon, an IMG. I completed Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana.
Beautiful.
So I'm currently in Nashville, Tennessee. Currently preparing for my step 1.
Okay, and what area of medicine are you interested in going into?
Internal medicine.
Very cool. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So as our speakers talking, think about some questions you would like to ask. Okay. Max, we're going to try you one more time. Oops. Max, are you there? You want to tell us who you are, where you are in your training?
Hey, no, sorry. Yeah, I'm Maxwell Afari. I'm a cardiologist based in Maine, and I'm specialized in advanced heart failure and transplant, and I'm the program director for the cardiology fellowship at Maine.
Beautiful.
Sorry about earlier on.
No, no worries at all. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's get this show started. So I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dr. Fran Abani. I am a pediatric infectious disease doctor by training, but I work at the CDC and actually just took on a deputy director position for our commission core activities. Thank you, sir. We have a very esteemed panelist today, speaker today, Dr. Nii-Daako. He is a board certified trauma surgeon and is the host of Docs Outside of the Box podcast. Nii does a lot, so ask him as many questions about all the different things that he does. But I'm going to read his bio really quickly and just to give you a little bit of background, and he's going to tell us about himself. So like I said, he's the host of Docs Outside the Box podcast, and I've listened to a few of his podcasts, and it's really worth listening to. It's great.
Just
stuff.
a few? Come on.
Okay, several. All right, several. So his podcast features ordinary doctors living extraordinary lives with a focus on money, mindset, and mission. I've been in a couple of missions with Nii, so amazing doctor. Dr. Nii is the best-selling author of 3, 2, 1 podcast, The Beginner's Guide to, Building Brand Authority Through Podcasting. And he's helped other doctors find their own voices through his popular podcasting course, 10 Days of Podcasting. That's awesome. Dr. Nii has spent several years performing medical humanitarian work in Ghana with international healthcare volunteers. And that's how I actually met Nii. We met there first, or did we meet at GPSF first?
I think we met at GPSF. You met my wife at IHCB
Yes.
first.
Absolutely, that's true. So he serves as a mentor for the Tour for Diversity in Medicine, or T4D, an organization devoted to educating, empowering, and inspiring up-and-coming minority physicians. His newest venture is Equal Access Health, a locum tenens company that helps doctors achieve the lifestyle they deserve and have always wanted. We should talk. Dean Dr. Nee holds a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine from Kansas City University of Medicine and Bioscience, and an MBA in Healthcare Leadership from Rockhurst University. He completed his general surgery residency at Morehouse School of Medicine, Atlanta, that's where I am, during which he was featured on CNN's Grady's Anatomy special. You're gonna have to tell us about that. Is that like a
Yeah.
spinoff of Grey's Anatomy?
It was, and I broke duty hours on TV. It was bad.
Nice. He then went on to complete a trauma/surgical critical care fellowship at the University of Miami. In addition, he's a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. So let us welcome our speaker today. Dr. Darko, tell us all about yourself. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are, what your interests are, all that good stuff. The audience wants to hear from you. I'm going to take myself off the screen so it can be all about you, and then I'll come back towards the end when we ask questions, okay?
Okay. Dr. Fran, thank you really very much for the amazing introduction. Definitely, when I started, just being on my own and practicing on my own, I never thought that someone would say an esteemed career. So, Dr. Fran, thank you very much for describing my career that way. Two things. I'm glad we actually have a cozy group of people here. This is completely interactive. So if you have any questions, go ahead and just raise your hand, or electronically raise your hand, or just chime in and ask some questions. And the other thing is, I'm fighting a little bit. I got off a cold and I have a little bit of a cough, so you may hear my voice quiver and I might take some water. So I apologize in advance for that. But the way how my career started is, I went to osteopathic medical school, and then from there I went to an allopathic residency in Atlanta. And from there I wanted to do trauma. And I kind of knew that I just didn't fit in for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. And it wasn't until when I finished my fellowship and training that it was time to look for a job. And when it was time to look for a job, anybody here who has looked for a job, and definitely, I think Dr. Nii-Daako, you there? Is Carissa there? Like, when you get to a point where it's time for you to look for a job, like, everything changes. You go from just being lucky to just get into a position of just getting into medical school or just getting into residency, to now you're at a point where you start to be able to feel like you're in the driver's seat, and you feel like there's multiple hospitals and multiple private practices that are actually vying for your services, so to speak. So I would go on these interviews for about 5 or 6 hours, and then at the end they will say, "Hey, we want to, give you a contract to work here, but here's a contract for 3 to 5 years." And it just didn't sit right with me, because I don't know, I just didn't want to commit for that long. So I ended up doing something that's called locum tenens, and what that is just like, you go to an office or you work in a tech company, or wherever it may be, and they may have temp workers, right? Like somebody will work there for maybe a week or maybe a month or maybe even longer, because maybe someone is on maternity leave, or maybe they just have staffing shortages. The same thing occurs in hospitals, where doctors will go primarily to suburban areas as well as rural areas, and go and work there for a period of time, however that may be. So I decided to do that instead of take a permanent job. And everybody at my residency and fellowship thought I was crazy. Everybody thought that I was blowing up my career, mainly just because nobody else has done that before. Everybody will finish and go work at some academic institution. Excuse me. So during those years, those first 2 years of working as a locums, when I'm working there, I get to dictate what hours I want to work. I get to dictate when I want to work. If I want to spend, 2 weeks of not working, I could go ahead and do that, and nobody's going to judge me. If I want to work for 4 weeks straight with no days off, nobody's going to judge me. I kind of dictate the way in which I work. based off of how I want to work, which is very different than when you, excuse me, when you are a resident, and definitely something that maybe a medical student can't really think about at at that point. Um, but that was the fork in the road that I had. So I kind of knew at that point that I really enjoyed this type of lifestyle where, I work really hard for a week or maybe 2 weeks, and then I take 2 weeks off, maybe even 3 weeks. If nobody's looking, maybe in 4 or 5 weeks. And then I hit it hard for another 5 weeks, 6 weeks straight with no days off and do the same thing. And this allowed me to, from a financial standpoint, do some things that I just always wanted to do. My dad had prostate cancer during that time. I was able literally to pay all of his fees, which was very gratifying, for my family to sacrifice in so many different ways and for me to come back and really help out in a way that would have caused either bankruptcy or some type of major financial issue for them. So to be able to step in was really major. So after that, after a couple of years, excuse me, after a couple of years, I decided to work at that same hospital, but work as an employed doctor. So that means that I work, they tell me when to work, I check in, I check out, and um, I check in, I check out, and my health insurance is paid for. It's a traditional employment for a doctor. I did that for 3 years, and I absolutely hated it. I hated it. I felt like as a doctor, I didn't really have control over my career. I didn't have control over when I wanted to work. I didn't have control over, sometimes even clinically what I could do for patients. So during that time, those 3 years, me and my wife, she's a doctor also. We went to the same med school. We got our MBAs at the same time. So I brought $325,000 of student loan debt, and she brought the same exact amount. So we had about $660,000 of student loan debt. So we were in this conundrum where, we're working, but we can't necessarily stop working because we got this huge monkey on our back. And we made this plan that the reason why we live in the middle of nowhere, the reason why we have this lifestyle is primarily to pay off this debt, which is not the reason why we became doctors. So I just want to really reiterate that. Like, we did not become doctors so that we can work all the time just to pay off the debt. I want you guys to understand that. I did not become a doctor to work just to pay off the debt. And when, it really hit us that that's what we were doing, that's when we decided that we really have to take back control of our lives. We have to get the debt out of our lives, and that'll allow us to do the things that we really want to do. Hence, after we got the debt taken care of, that's where you start to hear Dr. Fran saying all of the things that we want, that we started doing, because we just said, look, this is our life. We're going to figure it out and just kind of make it happen. And it's going to be exciting. So since then, does someone have a question? Let me see. Dr. Darko, how did you acquire knowledge about how to navigate the financial side of medicine? Did your MBA help with that? Nope. So I'm going to tell you this right now. If you are interested into the finances if you're just interested in business, you do not need an MBA for that. If you're interested in starting a business, there are plenty of successful people who have started businesses, who are entrepreneurs, who do very well in business, and they do not have an MBA. The point of getting an MBA, and it's a master's in business administration, is that you are understanding the concepts of middle management. You're understanding the concepts of how management occurs, of how not entrepreneurship, but how to manage a business on a large scale. So you understand finances, you understand economics on a micro and macro level, you understand everything that you can learn in an MBA. You're going to learn that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to become an excellent business person, or it doesn't mean that you're going to be good at just starting up different businesses. So the reason why I decided to get my MBA was because I knew that at the time, this is 2002, 2003, I knew that I probably wanted to start my own private practice, but that, I knew I wasn't going to be able to run the finances of the business. I was probably going to end up hiring maybe an office manager. This is a person who will literally just run the practice. But I wanted to make sure that when I'm talking to her, that he or she, I understand the language, the lingo of different types of reports that they're running, of different types of reimbursements that I'm getting from Medicare and Medicaid. And then probably like 2 years into my MBA, this is 2004, 2005. A lot of you all may not remember, but this is when Medicare Part D came in. And all of the policy issues and the policy fights was something that I found really intriguing and kind of put me down this different path of just kind of understanding the business of healthcare and really understanding how big this really is. And I think when you really understand how big this system is, you really understand and you start to think about how small you really are. You start to think about, well, if I'm this small, how much change can I really, how much change can I really have in this big system? Right. And after being very realistic, I'm like, well, look, like I can't really change the system from within the system. I have to do things differently in order to get the results that I want. Hence my life of kind of just doing things outside of the box, because it's almost like deplugging from the matrix, if you want to look at it that way. I really can't do much to change the system for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not really interested in that. And two, I just don't think that me, myself, can do much of a change, but I can do things differently where maybe I can convince surgeons and doctors and medical students to consider a non-traditional way of practicing medicine with my podcast, as well as how me and my wife live our lives. People ask, well, why did you pay off your debt in 3 years? Because I just didn't want to be attached to a hospital. If I wanted to take some time off, if I wanted to go back to Ghana and practice, I wanted to be able to do that without having to worry about, well, how am I going to make this payment? I really wanted to get that out of my life. And when I grew up in Queens, New York, I just, finances wasn't what I was thinking about when I became a doctor. It was really taking care of people. And anybody who's been on a mission trip, I know Dr. Fran knows, these folks will come out and spend a significant amount of time waiting to be taken care of, by you. And it is as close to a professional reboot as I can say. You literally are taking care of people in, the most purest of forms. There's no insurance that gets in the way. A lot of the things that we think about that possibly may get in the way and distract from that patient-doctor relationship, you don't really have in third world countries. They really need your help. And if you're a doctor that's, in a community of, I don't know, 100,000 people, you may be the only doctor in that community, which means that, when you're in the United States in this big healthcare system and you're like this, well, the ratio changes when you're in a third world country or maybe a semi-industrialized country, and you become a little bit of a bigger fish and you can make some significant changes in a community. These are the things that kind of I was thinking about while I was paying off debt and while I was having this non-traditional career. So after 3 years of working as an employed doctor, and I apologize if I'm zigzagging all over the place, but after 3 years of becoming an employed doctor, we paid off our debt. We started a bunch of businesses, and we're just like, yo, we're out. We're deplugging from the system. We're not going to be employed anymore because it doesn't work for me and Renee anymore. And we work, excuse me, we work 100% as independent contractors, locum tenens. So what that means is I'm not employed by a hospital. I sell my services to a hospital. And much like a hospital would hire a plumber or hire some type of construction person, that person will provide a service and then they bill the hospital. The hospital will pay them back, right? And when they get paid, this pay is doesn't have any taxes taken out of it or at all. It's a large lump sum. And from that amount, I'm responsible for paying my own taxes. I'm responsible for getting my own health care. I'm responsible for doing my own retirement. I'm responsible for getting hotels. I'm responsible for getting my own medical malpractice. And with all that in mind, I still love it. It's great. Everything that I told you about, that would scare a lot of people. And when I first started initially, it was really, it seemed really daunting, but I got the hang of it. And for me, the big, strong push to live my life like this was really just I wanted to be in control of my life. I wanted to be in control and have autonomy. And I'm not saying that you can't be, that you, once you're employed, that you can't have that. I'm definitely not saying that at all. I'm just saying what works for me and what works for my wife, and that we just chose to deplug. And that's why we kind of live our lives in this fashion where starting a podcast and doing all these different things. It's just, this is what I'm interested in doing. And I'm not sure, based off of the specialty that I'm in, in the circles that I would have to go into if being an employed doc or working at an academic center, if I would be allowed to really kind of flap my wings in this fashion. Let's see, we have a question. Let's see. Someone says, do you have an LLC? Is it an S Corp or a C Corp? So that's a good question. So, so when I get paid, when I work at a hospital, I'm working as Dr. Nii-Daako. When I come home, I fill out a timesheet, and then I go to QuickBooks and I put in my timesheet, and it equates to the time equates to something per hour. And then when I send a bill to the hospital, I don't send a bill as Dr. Nii-Daako. I send it as my company. And my company is called Equal Access Health. The reason why I say that is as a locum tenens, I travel all over the place. And wherever you go, where I'm there, you're going to get equal access to healthcare or trauma care, whether you are in a rural area or in a suburban area. That's why I named it that company. So when I bill, I don't bill as Dr. Nii-Daako. I bill as my company. And without getting into too much specifics, my company is what's called an S corporation. And the reason I did that is it allowed me to have most flexibility with being able to decrease my taxes, as well as being able to maximize the most amount of what I can put into my 401k, hire my wife, and she works also, hire our kids and so forth. So that at the time when I started was 2014, the S corporation made sense. But I do give the disclaimer that all of this information that I'm giving you in terms of what type of corporation to start, you should definitely talk to a tax professional about that. And as a matter of fact, with the Trump tax changes, actually, I think that being a C corporation might be more attractive over these last 2 years than an S corp. But once again, make sure you speak to a tax professional about this. So the message that I have for you guys is just to let you know that there's multiple ways that you can skin a cat. There's multiple ways that you can practice as a physician. And the traditional way has many rewards, and you can affect a lot of people's lives. But there's also another way in which you can practice that I think a lot more people are starting to shift towards, which is locum tenens. And that's what I do, and that's what I enjoy. So I was talking to a second-year resident over the phone who's considering trauma, and she asked me, she's like, why do you practice this way? Why do you practice as a trauma surgeon? How is it that you're able to, operate and take out an appendix and then, walk away? Well, what's going on in medicine is we're getting to a point where a lot of the medicine that we practice is what's called shift-based work, which means that a physician will work for a period of time. And this period of time, it could be 12 hours, it could be 24 hours, maybe it's 2 days. And then when they're done, their shift is over. Somebody else will assume care of that patient as if it is his or her own patient. And that allows you to kind of deplug. It kind of goes away from the old school way of surgery, which is, you're always attached to your pager. Your patients can always come back to the ED and you always have to be available. And if you want to go on vacation, there's that page that goes off as you're taking your kids and your wife to the airport. Like those days, at least for trauma surgery, have gone by the wayside. So that's why I practice this way, because it just gives me the best balance in terms of being able to practice, but also at the same time enjoy my life and, be with my kids and be with my wife and, take my kids to Ghana, take my wife to Ghana and, go visit my aunts and uncles and so forth, or wherever I want to go and do whatever I want to do. So does anybody have any other questions at this moment about that?
Wow. We just got a full breakdown of the business of medicine. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Nee. Any other questions? And I want the folks that have joined us to introduce themselves. AO, can you tell us who you are? Tell us your name and what where you are in your training and what city you're in, city and state.
Hi. My name is Andrew Ofosu. I'm in Ohio, Cincinnati, and I'm currently an interventional gastroenterologist. So I'm practicing at this time.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining us. Did you have another question you wanted to ask?
No.
Okay. Thank you for the good question you asked earlier.
Okay.
We're going to move on. Pardon? We're going to move on to Cecilia. Cecilia, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Cecilia Banga. I'm an OBGYN in Greensboro, North Carolina, fellow DO, and I
Say that again. We missed the last part of what you said.
said private.
Private practice. Cool. What's city and state are you in? Did you say?
I
Okay.
think she said South Carolina, I think.
Yeah. North Carolina. Awesome.
she said-
Welcome. Did you
I
have
have
a
a,
question?
go ahead.
Pardon?
No, go ahead, please.
Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I did a presentation, like a really short presentation, but I'm going to hold off on it because I think I think because of the group that we have, I think it could. I think the way in which we're doing it makes it more cozy, but I'll hold off on it because I don't want it to kind of ruin the atmosphere and kind of make it like a lecture and bore everybody out. So
Sure, no worries. Dr. Wedu, you just joined us. You want to introduce yourself, to tell us your name, where you are in your training, and what city and state you're in?
Hi guys, I'm actually in
that's
Florida.
the listener, long time
Currently a
listener.
cardiology fellow. Yeah, Dr. Nee, what's going on? Long time listener, fellow Ghanaian, out here in Florida. Nice to meet you all.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Edward, I think you left us. Let's go on to Harris. Give me a second, I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Harris, introduce yourself. Harris, you there? Going once, going twice. All right. Jen, introduce yourself. You're muted if you're talking. The joys of technology, right? Jen, are you with us? You want to introduce yourself? If not,
Hello?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
we hear you now. Yes.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Jennifer Awuku. I'm a pathology resident at Baylor in Houston.
Very cool. Thank you for joining us. Did you have a question you wanted to ask our speaker?
No, not at this moment.
Okay.
For the residents as well as the medical students on here, have you guys ever heard of locum tenens or working as an independent contractor with a hospital?
Raise your hand if you have. It's the best kept secret.
Dr. Boadu, okay.
And then we have our executive secretary. Please introduce yourself, madam. So we're just asking for your name, what area you practice in, and what city and state you're in.
Hello, hi everybody. Sorry, I'm late. I'm Dr. Forty Kumafuli. I'm a family medicine and preventive medicine trained. I also do OB and I practice in Southwest Indiana.
Awesome. And she's going to be our guest speaker in a couple of months, so make sure you tune in for that. Very exciting. So Nii, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You've given us a lot to think about, and you have spoken to, like I said, the business side of medicine that a lot of people don't think about. locums is truly the best kept secret. A friend of mine did locums for a couple of years and was able to pay off a chunk of change in debt and other things. So thank you for sharing that. Are there things that you think residents and fellows and even docs would want to know, need to know about getting into the locum tenens world and how to best utilize that aspect for just like you said, a better life and all of that?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good question because I've actually had a number of residents and a number of fellows reach out to me and say, hey, you always talk about locums on your show, but my attendings or my professors have told me that if you do locums, that people won't respect you. People think that you can't work with other people. People wonder why are you shifting from one hospital to another hospital, or people think that you can't hack it. And I think that those are all um, um, uh, reasons that need to be individually addressed. But if you take a step back and listen to all of those reasons, those are all steeped in two things usually. One, they don't know much about locum tenens, and two, it's fear, right? And what I mean by that is when locums first started, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, like, yeah, like it was the wild, wild west. Who knows about that stuff, right? You don't know what you're going to get. The other thing too is that you have a lot of attendings who, when they're at a training or academic institution, like that's all they know, right? That's all they know. So when someone who they spent a significant amount of time with mentoring, molding, and they're seeing them progress from medical student or even just resident up until the point where they're able to practice on their own, and they hear that somebody's going to do something that may appear to be unproven or is something that is not within the academic realm. I think a lot of times attendings may panic and say, what are you doing? You're going to destroy your career. And I really think that that's a disservice because I think that this is an opportunity to really equip your residents with the knowledge of how to be malleable, right? Medicine, particularly how it is with this huge complex, we do a poor job of preparing our residents for what to expect, how to handle insurance companies, how to handle discharges, how to handle student loans. And one of the one of the biggest ways that I think that you can practice autonomy outside of going into private practice, which is very difficult nowadays, is at least separating yourself from a hospital and not taking the employed route. That is one option to really consider. And it gives you a way to think about things that you may not necessarily think about things when you're employed. And nothing lasts forever, right? Like you can always say, hey, go ahead and do locums, do it for a couple of years. If you don't like it, you can come back. Like nothing in medicine, nothing in your career is ever final, right? Everything can change. Everything is malleable. And obviously with medical school as well as with residency, there's always this, if you act out of line, if you speak up, if you are someone who stands out, you have the opportunity or the possibility of actually losing your spot or getting kicked out or someone else is going to take it. Well, it doesn't work like that once you become an attending. Like this is your life and you can take it and move in so many different ways. So when residents come to me or fellows come to me or even young attendings say, hey, I've heard about this attending, or excuse me, this locums life, but someone told me this, someone told me that, someone told me all these different things. I say, listen, like here's an opportunity for you to try it for a year, 2 years. And I would do A, B, C, and D. And if you don't like it, you can always go back into the academic realm. So I think that it's really important for residents and the young attendings to understand that, listen, like you're in control of your career after a certain point, right? Like your attendings are not going to be giving you a grade once you leave residency, right? And like trying to prove yourself, well, I got to do this because this is the way how they did it, over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like when is that going to stop? So for me, it took me a while to realize that. And I've had attendings tell me don't go into locums. And then literally 5 years later, they've called me and said, hey, how do I do locums? Like, make that make sense. Right. So I don't think it's perfect. It is not perfect. It is far from perfect. That's why I always say it works for me. I can explain it for everyone else and you can make it work for yourself. But you just need to understand that the key thing with this is you've been given a key to a Maserati, right? And you can either drive that Maserati really fast or you could drive the Maserati really slow, or you can hit the brakes fast. Or it's really up to you to decide. But it's a Maserati, so what you gonna do about it, right? And for you to like hand over the keys and let like your attendings be in the passenger side and tell you, don't make that left turn, don't make that right turn. It's gonna make for a boring drive. You might as well just put me in a Toyota Corolla. So that's how I describe it. It's like you might as well just drive the car, drive your career the way how you should be driving it, and that's as a Maserati. Pimp it, make it work.
Awesome. That's a very interesting analogy. So you said there's some challenges with this locums life.
Oh yeah.
Can you share some of the challenges that you've experienced and how you've overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are times where, depending on where you look for a job, so the key thing is nobody wants to shift from a job to a job to a job to a job like every week or so, right? Like you don't want to have to carry on multiple books that have multiple logins from multiple hospitals and then you're on the road. Like not many people want to do that. That's not for that's not for everybody. So there are times when being a locums, it could be a little too temporary, right? Like you have a job for a month or maybe 2 months, and then you may have another job in a different area. That's not always the case. You can do things to make sure that, that doesn't occur. So I know some of the experts in locums, what they do is they'll get 3 or 4, locums gigs at the same time, and they'll rotate those all the time so that if hospital A says, you know what, we don't need you anymore, it's like, okay, well, I'll just go to 3. And the likelihood of, let's say even the second hospital goes down, then you still got 2 hospitals that you can kind of go around to and so forth. But if you don't do that, it can be annoying sometimes traveling between places. And I think now it's less more so now than it was like 10 years ago when I was doing it, and definitely before that. Before we didn't have the Affordable Care Act. So imagine trying to get insurance, outside of being employed. But now, from 2012, 2013 onwards, I've had no issues with trying to get insurance. I have a 5-year-old and I have a 3-year-old and I have a wife. Like I haven't had any issues trying to secure medical insurance for them. But I know sometimes just that thought process of purchasing medical insurance or creating your own retirement plan, those things can seem rather daunting. But there's ways in which you can educate yourself on this stuff, and it can seem actually rather freeing. But I think that could be a challenge also. And then I think the other challenge also, I think, for folks is just like getting out of your own way and realizing, like I said before, like your career is going to be malleable. The days of staying at one place for a significant period of time, you're seeing it less and less and less and less, right? Unless you're at a very large, prestigious institution like the majority of people are going to be going, into different hospitals, different departments, different parts of the country, and so forth. So you might as well learn to kind of take control of your career. Excuse me, guys. Take control of your career and understand that, hey, things change and go from there. So
you said you have this company, Equal Access Healthcare, where you help other doctors kind of liberate themselves from the traditional routes of medicine. Tell us a little bit more about that. What type of services do you provide for doctors to be able to do that?
So actually, Equal Access Health is a locum tenens company. So we focus primarily on OB as well as trauma surgery. So if someone says, hey, I want to do OB locums, then they will contact us just like they will contact any other locums company. And we will say, hey, we have this hospital and this hospital available. Are you interested? And this is how much they are paying. And then if they are interested, then we go through the process of getting you credentialed and working at that hospital, just like any other locums company. The thing that we really focus on is because it's really technology based, we don't have the overhead like the other companies. So we're able to pay more than other companies. So, everything that we do, we just do it like a locums company, but we just do it everything really digitally. But you end up keeping more of your money. The other thing that we throw in there that a lot of companies don't do is we do lectures and we do a lot of education on how to decrease your tax burden. There's really 2 thoughts of looking at things. When you work as an employed doctor versus you're working as an independent contractor, you're a business here. So there's a little bit more leeway in things that you can do to kind of help your tax burden and so forth. So we discussed those type of things with them. And that's pretty much it. You know, we've been doing it since 2016.
Uh,
Right now, we just focus primarily on OB and trauma. I'm going to keep it that way for right now. But it's one of those things we kind of just stumbled into, and then we're just like, well, you know, let's continue to, you know, keep it going and continue to educate folks. But it's really fun. It's a very fun thing, fun aspect.
Very cool. Are there other questions from the audience? Raise your hand or put it in the Q&A. We want to hear from you. While we are waiting for questions, let me ask you, what type of personality types should stay away from locums tenens work versus those that should be drawn to it? Because I'm thinking like, as doctors, our path has been paved from elementary school all up through residency. Like you do 4 years of college, then you do 4, you know? So some of the fears could be the instability, not knowing what's next, but it's also liberating, right? So I'm sure there are certain personality types that's going to lend to, and there's certain personality types just like, I can't. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think if you're really rigid, this is an opportunity to really, you know, test how rigid you really can be. But rigidity could be an issue because you're going to be going to different hospitals, you're going to be meeting different people. There's going to be different expectations. And, you know, how people act at hospital A may not necessarily be how they act in hospital B, right? And also at the same time, nobody likes, well, at hospital A, this is what they do, and you guys should change things up, right? Like, it's almost like when you're in Rome, act like how the Romans would act. As long as it doesn't, you know, as long as it doesn't affect your standard of care, just know that for the most part, you're a guest in someone's house. You know, you do the best that you can. But if you're really rigid, it may be a little bit difficult for you to go to someplace different. But also at the same time, if you're really rigid, it may be really great for you because you're just like, look, I want to do things my way and I know how to do it this way and that's the way I'm going to go. So I've seen some really rigid people like just do locums only because they are the boss. You know, they make the final decision. They don't have a supervisor, so to speak. So I think that personality right there, that's the crutch of everything. Can you make it work in your behalf? Or are you so rigid that nobody wants to hire you to come back? You know,
problem.
That could be an issue. I think, you know, for me, the way how I looked at it was just like how you said, like I worked at Grady, and then from there I went to Jackson, and you know, I just been at indigent hospital after indigent hospital. Let me get a chance to see what it's like to be at a rural hospital or at a level 2 trauma center, or do private practice trauma surgery, which was really interesting. I don't like that, but it was very interesting to see how that was practiced, and it was fun. You know, I got to meet a lot of interesting folks. Medicine is just is so multifaceted, and you really have to have an open mind. And I ultimately tell people that it's really not about creating a great career. It's really about creating a great life. That's the real win in life, is if you can get that, like, I just want to have a dope life. I just want to have an amazing life. I think that's where you'll really, just see that exponential growth in your life, in your career. So.
Very cool. Yeah, so look, it just sounds like it just allows you to touch on different aspects. Maybe you're curious about a certain area of your field. You get to see how it's done in different parts of the country in different ways and private practice. That's awesome. So we have a question from somebody in the audience. Abdul, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Dr. Darko, thank you for doing this. Abdul, my question is, what is the difference between just, let's say, do locums by just, taking a job from a locums company, or forming your own like private company and then taking like the jobs from the locum companies? Does it make any difference?
So it's a good question. So basically, when you are working outside of being employed, so if you are not employed by a hospital, then you are what's called an independent contractor. Like, you are like a plumber, you are like a roofing person, you are providing a service to the hospital, right? So when you work in a hospital in that way, either with a locums company or by yourself, it doesn't really matter. Where it matters is how much money you take home,
Mm.
right? So basically, the locums company becomes a third, like almost becomes like a third party for you, a middleman for you. They're the ones who have a list of all the different hospitals. They know the contacts, they know all the contracts, they know all the different things that you may not want to get dirty and find out what's in how things are made in the kitchen. And they introduce you to a hospital, right?
Mhm.
And then let's say you decide to work with a locums company. When you sign a contract with a locums company, you are still an independent contractor. You just have an agreement with them. And some of these agreements may be, hey, like um like you promise not to like act a fool, and if you act a fool then you got to go, or you got to do your notes. If you don't do your notes, then that's how the hospital's going to bill, so you can't expect us to pay you if you ain't gonna do your notes, right? Like these are the type of things that you will do in your agreement. But one of the things that is really important in the agreement, it says that there is, let's make it very clear that this is an independent contractor versus, excuse me, this is an independent contractor type of relationship. You are not employed by the locums company. Then when you go and work at that hospital, you know, you're just working in the hospital, not as an employee, but just as a contractor. That's it. You're on medical staff, but you're not, you know, you're not, what do you call it? You're not under many of the guidelines and the bylaws that maybe an employed doctor would have to face. There are some medical staff guidelines that you have to fall under, but there's a lot of things that you, as employed, excuse me, as an independent contractor, you don't have to go through. So just long story short, you're never, if you're working with a locums company, you're never employed. You're just basically a subcontractor for them. So, for example, if you work with my company, it's the same thing. Like I introduce you to a hospital, and then you go and work at a hospital. And when the hospital pays me, I pay you. Now, if you decide to do it yourself, there's no middle person, right? So you control everything. So now you get a larger piece of the pot because you are setting up all the contracts, you're getting your insurance, you're taking care of your flights, you're taking care of all your transportation. And the reason I say it like that is not to make it like it's daunting. It's just, it's a lot more work. But also at the same time, if you're going to do a lot more work, you should expect a lot more money. So that's just something to think about. And that's the beauty of this. Like there are options for this. Like you can do it on your by yourself if you want to, or you can go through a locums company if you want to, you know, or you can be employed. Just know that you have options, and you know, don't be closed off to any of them.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. So we have about 6 minutes left. If there are no questions, and feel free to put the questions in the, oh, wait, we have one.
Oh, how do you handle medical insurance for you and your family, from Max? Are you talking about health insurance, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I believe so.
So if it's health insurance, it's been super easy since 2011. Shout out to Obama and the Democrats because this, I don't know how people did this before. I have no clue how people got insurance before. But basically, that you go on the market, it's different, or the website is different for everybody's. Oh no, it's not. It's healthcare.gov, right? You go to healthcare.gov. They ask you like very simple questions like, what's your age? How many people you want to get insured? And what state you're in. And then from there, they'll navigate you to each individual marketplace for the states. And then you just start looking for insurance. And the way how we start off is when we were employed, we took our insurance plans and then we looked at the insurance plans that they had on the market. And then from there, we just decided to purchase it. And then when we buy it, then we, like my company or me, I pay the premiums on a monthly basis, right? And I have healthcare, and I get an insurance card, and it has my name, it has Renee, my wife's name on it, it has my two kids' name on it. But every month I paid a premium. And then the cool thing is what I get to do with it is I take that, all of those premiums, and I talk to my CPA about it, and I say, hey, look, we need to make this tax deductible because this is the cost of doing business. And that's the flex right there. So for me, for example, let's say, you know, let's say I'll make it as very simple as possible. Let's say, for example, I made $50 for the entire year, or $100 for the entire year. I can get taxed on $100, which is going to be a certain rate. But if I buy health insurance with it, and if I buy a computer and I buy a stethoscope, and you know, I also contribute to my retirement account, and that brings how much I made total from $100 to $50. Now I'm being taxed on $50 instead of being taxed on $100. Do you see how that works? But I spent that $50 to make 100 on things that I absolutely need.
Yeah.
Health insurance, retirement, computer, stethoscope. Do you see how that works? So the government is actually is giving me a bonus for actually putting money into the economy, but I'm also getting things back by not getting taxed on that. That's kind of the flex. That's kind of how this works with the IRS. So I oftentimes tell people, the IRS is it's a very thick set of instructions, but it's really, if you follow it, it really rewards a certain type of behavior. And that's the reason why certain people are able to really do really well with it, because they understand that it's really like a code of ethics as opposed to something that you did bad and you're going to get taxed at the end.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Wedu. You had a question? Unmute yourself. Great. Or not? Did you want to ask a question? Okay. While we're waiting for him to unmute, tell us a little bit about the mission.
Can you hear me?
Okay, we hear you now. Go ahead, ask the question. I want
Sorry
to hear
about that.
about your mission work before we finish up. Go.
Sorry, I was connected to my car. I know there are a lot of benefits for basically being an independent contractor, but does it make sense to form an LLC and basically elect to be taxed as an S corp, or is it just okay to be an independent contractor?
So remember, when we're talking about LLC, incorporation, S corp, all of these different things, remember, the two most important things from a business standpoint is you need to separate. You want to make sure that if someone were to sue you, they cannot go after your personal funds.
Mm-hmm.
And who's most likely going to be sued? A business person or a business person who does medicine, right? Like a business person who does medicine. So forming an LLC is not going to cause you to decrease your taxes just by magic. What an LLC does is it separates your personal finances from your business finances. So it's really one of the best ways to protect yourself from someone saying, hey, I want to sue Dr. Boadu for X, Y, and Z, and I want to go after his personal funds. Well, what an LLC does is like, look, you can only go and get what's in the business, and that's it. You cannot go after his personal funds. So just remember, the LLC is more of a protection of making sure that nobody can sue you. Now, the next thing is becoming an S corporation or a C corporation. That's a tax type of entity to the IRS. And so that is where you can have a little bit of flexibility as to, well, can I deduct a home office, or can I deduct my cell phone, or should I hire someone, like my wife, and then put her on payroll so that I can start paying her a 401k, which will decrease the taxes. Like all of these different things all kind of depend on if you're an S corporation or a C corporation, or if you're a limited liability. That's where all that comes in. But if you just want to know, well, I'm going to be an independent contractor, should I just be an LLC? That should always be, you want to separate your personal liability from your business liability. So for me, yes, we are incorporated mainly because I don't want anybody to sue me and take my personal funds. And then that's when we start to do the other stuff on top of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. So Max has a question in the chat, kind of a follow-up to his last question.
Malpractice insurance? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
How's that handled? Do you also stick to very few states? He's saying it'll be daunting to obtain multiple state licenses.
Yeah, so the first one, medical malpractice insurance, the same way in which you get healthcare. There's no central place that you go to get medical malpractice, but there's two ways that you can do it. The easiest way is if you're working directly with a hospital as an independent contractor. Oftentimes they buy like these medical malpractice insurances for like thousands of doctors. So they buy medical insurance in bulk. So for them to add you onto their policy is oftentimes very negligible for them. And the way how I convince them is say, hey, let's say I want to get paid $50 an hour, right? I'll say, well, if I'm going to cover my own medical malpractice, now it's going to be $100 an hour. And it always magically they say, oh, you know what? We'll just put you on our medical malpractice and, we'll pay you $50 an hour. And I'm like, okay. The second way to do it is there are multiple companies that you can call and just say, hey, I'm looking for medical malpractice insurance in this state to do X, Y, and Z. How much will it cost for you to cover me? And I'm only going to work maybe 30 hours a month at this. And they will kind of run the numbers and say, okay, based off of that, for a trauma surgeon, that will end up being realistically $12,000 a year, right? But if you divide that by all the shifts that you're going to be taking, you divide that, and then what you do is you incorporate into your rate, and then you tell the hospital, hey, look, I'll cover my own insurance, and now my rate is no longer $50 an hour, it's like $75 an hour, right? That's how people do it. Those are the two ways in which people do it. I think the majority of people find it easier to just ask the hospital, look, can you just put me on your medical malpractice? Like, this is not really a big deal. Or, if you want to do it on your own, you could do it on your own. That's fine. But just tell the hospital it's going to cost a little bit higher. When you tell them that, usually they'll say, okay, we'll just put you on our medical malpractice. So it's very easy to get medical malpractice. Do not let that deter you.
I got it. So I was going to ask that very question. You have dropped a lot of nuggets tonight, lots of great information. I know you're full of so much more information. How can we all learn more? Give us a resource, a book. Tell us about your podcast. How do we get linked to your podcast so we can learn more about these business of medicine nuggets that you're sharing today?
Yes, so I think the easiest way, if you want to hear how we think and how we talk about all these different things, actually right now, if you go to Docs Outside the Box, right?
Say that again, what's it called?
Docs Outside the Box,
okay.
Right? If you check that out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere where you listen to music, just type in Docs, DOCS, Outside the Box, right?
In the chat, yeah.
Right now, over the next 3 to 5 weeks, we have a tax series with a really great, he's actually in your town. His name is Eric McLaughlin. He's in Atlanta, and he works with a significant amount of business people in Atlanta, mainly African-American and of African descent, and he does a really good job with them. And what we did is we talked about numerous scenarios, and then we chopped up the episodes into 5 to 10 minute episodes. So questions like Dr. Boadu, who asked, hey, should I do LLC or should I do S Corp or C Corp? Or, how do I, bring my tax burden down? We talk about these things on the show. We talk about, we talk about pop culture. We talk about medicine. We talk about money on the show. So I think that's the best way if you want to know how we think and, learn more about this. But you could also reach out to me. Just reach out to me I'll put in the chat, Dr. Nee.
While he's typing that, I would highly recommend his podcast. It is an excellent. I think that just went to me, Nee. So if you want to
oh, my bad.
share it with everybody.
Sorry.
It's an excellent podcast. He and his wife are y'all just have amazing chemistry, and just watching you back and forth is just, that in and of itself is just fun. But the wide range of topics that they talk about, the nuggets that they share, it's amazing. I would highly, highly recommend it. They have a lot of different guests that come on and talk about different topics. The two of them sometimes just vibe and talk about very interesting topics, their experiences and all that. So I would highly, highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, guys.
Absolutely.
Dr. Fran, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. It has been an amazing, amazing session. So this is session 2. Next month, we're going to have Dr. Akwesi Aponsa. He is a pain medicine doctor. He's actually, I consider him my little brother. We did med school together. He's a great, great.
You guys did med school together?
Yeah, he was a year or two behind me. Yeah,
wow. Styling doc.
Exactly, styling doc, very fashionable doctor. So he'll be here with us next month. So these sessions are going to be always the 4th Wednesday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you all for joining. We hope to see you next month, and have a great, great night.
Links in the chat. Check them out. Links in the chat.
Yes. Don't forget. Check out Docs Outside the Box. As you can tell, Dr. Darko whole career is just out the box, and it's just been an amazing career. And I love the opportunity, and I'm going to shut up after this. I just love the freedom that your lifestyle provides. Like, if the medical mission is in March, you're there. If it's in August, you're there. Like, you don't have to think about it. You're able to plan your own schedule, spend time with your family, spend time with your kids, just be there. I love that about what you and Renee are doing. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And it was a pleasure talking to you tonight as well. So have a great night, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Friend. Thank you very much, Dr. Friend.
All right, everybody have a great night.